Hi, welcome to Imperium Learning. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to apply the Bai-Perron test on Eviews. Before I start that though, I just want to give you a bit of background to it, answering questions such as why we apply it and also when we apply it. So as you can see from these first bullet points that I've put on the first slide, we normally apply this test if we suspect that our variable has more than one structural break in its data generation process. So in a previous video I showed how to do the chow test, which is a test geared towards variables that only have one structural break. Sometimes, particularly if our sample ranges for long enough, has a long enough range, then it's quite likely that we'll have more than one structural break, particularly if your variable is sensitive to the booms and busts that you'll see in economic cycles. So essentially I should give you a word of warning before applying this test, which is make sure that you have a sufficiently large sample size. In the actual practical example that I'm going to be showing you, I'm using quarterly data, so I have like over 100 observations in my sample, which is obviously worth more than 25 years worth of data. So just moving forward, this is the format of the equation. It's pretty complicated actually, particularly if you're not very quantitative. But I suppose I'm not going to spend too long explaining this because it's quite complicated, and I only tend to use 10-minute videos to kind of show you how to apply it. So if you want to pause the screen now and try and digest it, then do so. Now, moving on. So moving on to the next slide on my PowerPoint. As you can see, with respect to the format of the Bai-Perron test, it really depends on the actual test specification that we do on Eviews. I'm going to be showing you this now, just for your knowledge. We'll be using the global information criteria as our test specification, and I'm not going to go into it now, but suffice to say you can pause the screen now to read this little bullet point that I've written there. But anyway, I just want to move on to Eviews. So firstly, I want to show you my variable. I'm going to choose the unemployment rate. Unemp right there stands for unemployment rate. So we're going to open this up. As you can see, this is a more complex data generation process than, say, something like Lun GDP. You can see Lun GDP there is quite easy to look at, quite easy to understand rather. It's really only got one structural break, and it really is just something that's sort of trending upwards. But this is a bit more complicated, and so when I look at this, I suspect that there are perhaps more than one structural break. So we're going to be applying the Bai-Perron test to my unemployment rate data. So all we're going to do is we're going to run a least squares regression, and all we're going to do is we're going to regress it on a constant, and that's it. And we're going to click OK. Now, if we want to do the Bai-Perron test, we click on View, we click on Stability Diagnostics, and then after that we click on Multiple Breakpoint Test. Multiple Breakpoint Test. Now, as I said before, we're going to be selecting the global information criteria, and we're just going to click OK. Now, if we look at this, we can see straight away that it selected 4 breaks in the data generation process. 4. And these are the listed dates right here, the estimation break dates for the unemployment rate. But I just want to take you back to the PowerPoint for a second and show you an extract from the journal article that Bai-Perron wrote and published back in 2003, which actually relates to this very test that I'm talking about right now. And in particular, I just want to draw your attention to this text, which is highlighted in red. It says the BIC and the LWZ. The LWZ is obviously the this value right here. If you see that, the LWZ criterion, if you just look there, and it's identified 4 breaks as well. The LWZ performed reasonably well in the absence of serial correlation in the errors, but chooses a much higher value than the true one in the presence of serial correlation. Well, what should we do to look at this? Well, firstly, we're going to click on View, go back to Estimation Output, then click on View, go to Residual Diagnostics, and then we're going to test for serial correlation. Let's just do it with 2 lags first. So as you can see here, we're doing the Broish-Godfrey serial correlation test. This is our test statistic right here. It's actually the second row that you have to look out for, rather than the first. The test statistic is calculated by just doing the number of observations. I think I've got 102 observations multiplied by the R² value there. And as you can see, I've got a p-value of 0.000. So we've clearly got residual correlation. We can also test it with different lag lengths of the for the Broish-Godfrey serial correlation test. Let's try with 4 because I'm dealing with quarterly data. Click OK, and as you can see, my p-value right there, 0.000. It's still well below 0.05, and so as a result, it really does look like I've got serial correlation in that least squares regression that I did with the unemployment rate and regressing it on a constant. So what would I say then to you if you have a problem similar to what I found myself in? Well, firstly, I would just say try to avoid having samples of data where there are more than 2 structural breaks. And the reason that I kind of say that is because first and foremost, it's very difficult to find unit root tests that allow for more than 2 structural breaks. In fact, you can't even do a test on Eviews if you a unit root test on Eviews that allows for 2 structural breaks. I'm actually going to be showing you a unit root test called the Lee-Strazakic test, which is done on a software program called RATS. I'll be posting a video after this very quickly showing that. But ultimately, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have no more than 2. And again, this is directed for undergraduate and postgraduate students. The kind of advice I'm giving you now probably isn't very good for researchers who are looking to publish their work in academic journals, but for the purposes of a dissertation or an essay piece of coursework, I think this is a very good practical piece of advice to give you. I can see that I'm running quite close to the 10-minute mark now, so I'm actually going to record a second video now, which shows you how to do it with 2 structural breaks. So I'll post a second video concerning the Bai-Perron test. Okay, bye now.